Welcome back to Sissy Maya. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to never miss an update. Additionally, consider subscribing to my Patreon to get access to these features, and much more. Chris sat at the dressing table, closely inspecting his freshly shaven face as Sam watched from the bed. Already dressed in a padded panty girdle, waist cincher, pantyhose, a delicate bra with chest forms, and some additional padding for a rounded figure, Chris was almost unrecognizable. The padding gave him feminine hips and a shapely rear. Sam smiled, anticipating what was to come. Chris carefully cleaned his face to ensure there was no oil left, then put on a wig cap, making sure to tuck in his own hair. Using surgical tape, he shaped his eyebrows and adjusted the neck area, ensuring everything was perfectly in place. Once satisfied with the arch of his eyebrows, he removed a few stray hairs. Sam, who had witnessed this transformation many times, loved watching Chris become Mishelle. Next, Chris applied a rich moisturizer and while it set, he painted his nails with a dark red polish, matching his toenails. Though his nails were short, the polish gave them a feminine look. After a second coat and a top coat, he inspected his eyebrows again and tidied them up. Then, he applied foundation, blending it well to cover the tape and seamlessly run it into his cleavage. Chris opened a drawer to retrieve a beautiful painted wooden box adorned with Japanese characters, selecting his makeup for the evening. He used an eyebrow pencil to subtly highlight his brows, then applied light cream eyeshadow to the lids and a soft smoky touch at the outer corners. He skipped eyeliner, but added a light blush for a natural finish. With a final inspection, he was pleased with the minimalistic yet effective look he had achieved. From the jewelry box, he took out a pair of long turquoise earrings, his favorites, and attached them to his ears. About 6 months ago, he had pierced both ears, making a statement that he was confident in his choices. He then walked to the closet, retrieving an auburn human hair wig, one of 3 he owned, styled just for him after a trip to a salon. He carefully applied it, securing it with bobby pins and brushing it into place. Returning to the jewelry box, Chris selected a women's watch, matching bracelet, and several rings, including a cubic engagement ring on his left hand. These rings helped him avoid unwanted attention when he was out. He admired his transformation, glad to pass as a woman, though he appreciated that he already had someone special. Turning to Sam, he asked, "Do I pass?" "You never cease to amaze me," Sam replied. "You go from a handsome guy to a beautiful girl effortlessly. You've mastered makeup better than I ever could." Chris smiled. "I've had a great teacher." He returned to the closet and selected an outfit for their girls' night out, a casual dinner and movie. He picked a pink silk blouse and white shorts, knowing it wasn't typical for most girls to wear pantyhose with shorts, but he loved the feeling on his smooth legs. Slipping on the outfit, he left the blouse untucked and unbuttoned the top 2 buttons to reveal a little cleavage. He finished with a delicate choker to cover his Adam's apple and a pair of sandals with 2-inch heels. He spun around to show Sam, smiling proudly at his look. "As always, you look fantastic," Sam remarked. "Thanks, babe. You look great too. Ready to head out?" Sam stood up from the bed, handed Mishelle her purse, and the two made their way downstairs to the car. They drove to one of their favorite spots for a delicious meal, enjoying the experience of being treated like any other pair of friends out for the evening. Afterward, they headed to the mall and decided to do a little window shopping since they had some extra time before the movie started. Sam, whose real name was Hannah, came to a sudden halt at a clothing store window and pointed to a particular outfit. "You would look adorable in that. Let's see if they have it in your size." Mishelle smiled, knowing how much Sam loved shopping together. "Okay, but we'll be late for the movie." "Oh, all right," Sam replied with a grin. "But if the store's still open after, we're coming back for that outfit." They caught the movie, a chick flick, and finished around 8:15 p.m. Since it was a Friday, most of the stores were open until 9, so they quickly headed back to the clothing store. The place was nearly empty, with just a few other shoppers and 2 young sales clerks. Chris enjoyed shopping while dressed, especially with Sam by his side. After a few moments, one of the clerks, wearing a name tag that said Jill, manager, approached them. "Can I help you with anything?" Sam replied, "Yes. My friend is interested in the embroidered jean skirt and multi-layered top from the window, but we want to look around first. We'll be quick, we know you close at 9. Jill smiled. "The jeans outfit is over there, and the dressing rooms are this way. Don't worry, we won't rush you out at 9. Let me know if you need anything." "Thanks," Sam said as they began to browse. As they passed the lingerie section, Sam spotted a matching bra and panties set and held it up to Mishelle. "I think this would look great on you." Mishelle chuckled. "That's all I need, another bra. I have more than you do." Sam grinned. "It's okay, a girl can never have too many bras or panties." They continued to browse and soon found the matching jean skirt and top that Mishelle had seen in the window. It wasn't cheap, but Sam loved it. Mishelle thought it would look even better on Sam, but Sam insisted it suited Mishelle perfectly. They picked out the outfit and headed to the dressing room. Mishelle tried on the bra and panties first, and Sam's selection was spot on. She showed Sam, who nodded her approval. Mishelle looked in the full-length mirror and had to admit it was a great fit. Next, she tried on the jean skirt and top, and was pleasantly surprised by how cute it looked. Sam really did have great taste in clothes. She walked out to show Sam, who was chatting with Jill. Both of them looked her up and down and said in unison, "That looks amazing on you." The three of them laughed. Mishelle smiled and said, "Guess that answers that. We'll take it." After changing back into her original clothes, Mishelle met Sam and Jill at the checkout. It was 9:15, and the store was now empty. Jill began ringing up their purchases, which came to just over $100. Then Jill said, "I always offer a 10% discount to other special girls." Mishelle looked a little confused. "Other special girls?" "Yeah," Jill said. "You're really a guy, right?" Mishelle hesitated, her face flushing slightly. She glanced at Sam and nodded, "Yes." Jill smiled warmly. "Don't worry. I used to be a guy too. You were a tough one to figure out, but I took a chance and asked your friend." Mishelle was surprised. "You used to be a guy?" "Yep," Jill replied. "I was struggling by the time I was 15. My parents took me to therapy, and the therapist helped me realize what was going on. I started transitioning at 16, and now, at 26, I'm fully a woman, and I'm happy. I'm not shy about it anymore." Mishelle nodded, still processing. "But, what gave me away?" "Like I said, it was hard to tell at first. The nylons with the shorts caught my attention. It's not something you see a lot of girls do, but some do. So, I took a closer look and didn't notice anything too obvious. Your makeup wasn't overdone like most guys trying to look like girls, but then I overheard you talking to your friend, and your voice is a bit deeper. There were a few subtle things that made me wonder, so I asked. You're really pretty, and it's clear you pass well. It takes one to know one, and the chances of you being read are so small that I wouldn't worry about it. It's great that you have someone like her to go out with." "Sam is more than just a friend," Mishelle replied. "She's my best friend. She's my wife. And, she's the one who really helped me come out." "Wow, that's amazing. You found someone who loves you for who you are, without you having to play the macho guy. I'm really happy for you both. You're welcome to come back anytime." The three of them smiled at each other, and Jill opened the gate, giving both of them a hug. The rest of the evening was spent enjoying each other's company, deeply in love. The beginning. The relationship between Chris and Hannah started during their high school years. Hannah, an international exchange student from Japan, was spending a year in the United States to attend school and learn about American culture. Shortly after her arrival, her host family threw a welcome party. Chris, as the president of the National Honor Society and a member of the swim team, was invited. Although he wasn't a huge fan of parties, he felt it was his duty to attend and greet the new student, planning to stay just a short while. Chris arrived to find the street lined with cars, relieved that he had walked, as he lived only 3 blocks away. The day was nice, and the party was held in the host family's spacious backyard. Following the signs that pointed him to the side gate, Chris entered to find a crowd of nearly 100 people. Kathy Ryder noticed him first. She had a slight crush on Chris, but he only saw her as a friend. She quickly approached and asked, "When did you get here?" "Just walked in the gate." "Great. Let me introduce you to Hannah. She's really cool. Then you can grab some food. Jackie's dad's been grilling all afternoon." Kathy grabbed Chris's arm and led him over to a group of people. In the center was a pretty Japanese girl who seemed a bit nervous about all the attention. After a few moments, Kathy said, "Hannah, I'd like you to meet Chris Gifford. He'll be a senior this year, president of the National Honor Society, and on the swim team." Hannah extended her hand, and when Chris took it, an instant connection sparked between them. She was petite, maybe 5 feet tall, with black hair styled in a layered shag cut, dark eyes, and a bright, infectious smile. "It's very nice to meet you, Chris," she said in almost perfect English, her Japanese accent bringing a smile to his face. Chris, ever the gentleman, replied, "And it's a pleasure to meet you, Hannah. I hope you have a great time here." "Thank you, Chris. It's been wonderful so far. You can call me Sam." "Sam? How did that nickname come about?" "It's from my first English class. My classmates gave it to me, and it just stuck. Sam it is." "What events do you compete in for the swim team?" "Springboard and platform diving." "That's awesome." "Yeah, I'm not a fast swimmer, but diving's my thing." Kathy, sensing the growing connection between Chris and Hannah and hoping to interrupt, pulled Chris away to the food table. She did her best to keep his attention, but every time Chris and Hannah glanced at each other, they couldn't help but smile. Eventually, Kathy huffed, "Boys," and left them to their own devices. As the afternoon passed, people began to leave. Chris hadn't left early as he planned. Instead, he'd been chatting with friends, all the while keeping an eye on Hannah. By the time only about a dozen people were left, Hannah was sitting alone, chatting with the school principal, Mr. Gallagher. When he got up and walked away, leaving Hannah alone, Chris saw his chance. He excused himself from the group and walked over to her. As she looked up at him, she smiled in a way that Chris hadn't seen her smile at anyone else. "Hi Hannah, do you mind if I sit? Please. And remember, it's Sam," she said with a brighter smile. Chris sat down, and the two immediately began talking as if they were long-lost friends. Sam chatted nervously, telling Chris about her plans to take junior-level classes and a few senior-level ones to match her studies in Japan. She also mentioned she'd be staying in the US until next summer. Chris barely had a chance to get a word in. Finally, Chris said, "You know, almost everyone's gone. Do you think we should help the Gordons clean up?" "But you're a guest," Sam replied. "It's no problem. I just like to help," Chris said, standing and offering her his hand. She took it, and they stood, reluctant to let go but eventually parting. They walked over to Mrs. Gordon, who was cleaning up, and offered to assist. Mrs. Gordon insisted that they were guests and shouldn't worry about cleaning. So, the two of them found a task that needed doing and began working together. Kathy, watching from a distance, shot them an annoyed glare. After a few minutes, Mr. Gordon approached and said, "That's enough, you two. Hannah's the guest of honor, she shouldn't be cleaning." "But Mr. Gordon, we want to help." "There's so much to do," Sam protested. "You two go sit, and let us take care of it. Hannah will have plenty of chores once she settles in," he replied firmly. "Yes, Mr. Gordon," Sam said with a small bow. "Chris, can I talk to you and Mrs. Gordon for a minute?" Mr. Gordon asked. "Sure, sir. Let's find her," Chris said. Chris and Mr. Gordon walked to the kitchen where Mrs. Gordon was loading the dishwasher. "Betty, Chris wants to talk to us for a minute," Mr. Gordon said. "Hello, Michael," Mrs. Gordon greeted. "Hi, Mrs. Gordon. It was a great party," Chris said. "Thank you. It seems like you and Hannah got along really well." "Yeah, she's really nice. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you both about." Would it be okay if I asked her out to a movie tomorrow night? That sounds wonderful, Mrs. Gordon said with a smile. No drivin', Mr. Gordon interjected quickly. No, sir. I was thinking we'd go to the mall. There are a couple of good movies playing there. It's fine with us. Just ask her, Mrs. Gordon said. I will, but that's the hard part, Chris replied. It shouldn't be. You two have been talking for hours, she teased. Well, I've been listening. She's done most of the talking. I think I know most of her life story already, Chris said with a grin. Just go ask her. You'll be fine, Mrs. Gordon encouraged. Yes, Chris said. Chris walked back to where Sam was sitting, now joined by Kathy and Jackie. He stood there for a moment. Kathy was ignoring him, and Sam and Jackie were talking about people at the party. Chris pulled up a folding chair and sat down. A few minutes later, Mrs. Gordon called for Kathy and Jackie to help her. Chris looked over at Mrs. Gordon, and she smiled at him. He moved to sit on the glider next to Sam, who greeted him with a smile. Can I ask you something? Chris said shyly. Sure. Anything. You wouldn't want to go to a movie with me tomorrow, would you? I'd love to. But I'll have to check with the Gordons first. You won't need to, Chris smiled. I already did. This was the first of many dates. They became inseparable, attending all the school events together, including both the junior and senior proms. Hannah was at every one of Chris's swim meets, and he supported her on the tennis team. She attended his graduation with his parents and even helped host his party afterward. During her year in America, they fell deeply in love and became lovers. When the time came for Hannah to return to Japan, she grew depressed, and Chris did everything he could to lift her spirits. She tried to find a way to stay, but her parents insisted she come home. Their farewell at the airport was emotional, and Chris worked hard to maintain a strong front to help her cope with the separation. He promised they would be together again soon. After Hannah's plane left, Mrs. Gordon pulled Chris aside. She had never seen so many tears. Sitting him down, she asked, You fell hard for Hannah, didn't you? Yes, And she fell for you too? Yes. Are there others? No, Hannah and I are really in love. It's going to be hard with the distance, but we're going to work it out. Mrs. Gordon handed Chris a small package and card. She gave this to me to give to you after she was gone. Chris stared at the package in his hands, his heart heavy with worry. Deep down, he feared it was a final goodbye from Hannah. Slowly, he opened the card, admiring its beauty. The front featured a large red heart with the words My Love. Inside, there was a sweet verse, but what caught his attention was her handwritten message. My love, I have lost my heart to you. You will be mine forever, and despite the distance, we will work things out. The item in this box symbolizes my undying love for you. Keep me in your dreams. I love you. Sam. It was sealed with a kiss. Chris carefully opened the box. Inside, he found a small wooden box, but he couldn't figure out how to open it. At the bottom of the original box, he noticed a small envelope and opened it. The note inside read, My love, just like my heart, there are 3 simple moves to open this box. Following the instructions, he opened the box to reveal a delicate necklace with a Japanese character hanging from it. Another note inside read, Wear this always, until we are together forever. Hannah. Tears filled Chris's eyes as he cried again. Mrs. Gordon embraced him, saying, If you two are meant to be together, it will happen. Chris put the necklace around his neck. Mrs. Gordon read the notes, smiled, and reassured him, You two will get back together. That fall, Chris headed off to college, and he and Sam exchanged emails daily. Sometimes long, sometimes just a few words. By the end of the first semester, Chris's grades were acceptable but not impressive. Having gone from honor roll in high school to barely passing in college, he knew something was wrong. He spent Christmas break moping around at home. About a week before he had to return for the spring semester, Chris was home alone when there was a soft knock at the door. He opened it to find Sam standing there. They stared at each other for a long moment before she jumped up, wrapping her arms around his neck and her legs around his waist. Their lips met in a passionate kiss. It felt like hours, but it was only a minute or two before they broke apart. "What are you doing here?" Chris asked, stunned. "You're not happy to see me," she teased with a playful pout. "I'm thrilled to see you. But why are you here? Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to surprise you." "No kidding. A wonderful surprise. But why are you here?" "I'm going to college here." "You're not." "I am." "What school?" "Yours." "How?" "I took accelerated classes and finished a term early. I told my dad I was going to college in the States, and I wasn't taking no for an answer. And he agreed. I can wrap him around my little finger." "When did you get here?" "Yesterday evening. I'm staying with the Gordons until I move into the dorm." "Wait a minute. I got an email from you today." She grinned. "Not exactly. I wrote it before I left, and my sister sent it. Remember the sentence in Japanese at the end?" "Yes. It said, 'See you this afternoon. I love you. You need to learn Japanese.'" He kissed her again and whispered, "Teach me." "Can I see something?" she asked, breaking their embrace. "Sure." "What?" She reached up, unbuttoning his shirt, smiling as she pulled the necklace out. "I haven't taken it off since the day you left," Chris said softly. "I know." She closed the front door, took his hand, and led him to his bedroom. Later, as they lay in bed, she leaned down to kiss him deeply, caressing his body. "You're still hairless?" she asked. "You said you didn't make the college swim team, but you haven't let your body hair grow back." "Aha. I just like it that way, so I decided to keep it that way." "I thought you liked it too?" "I do. I was expecting you to be all hairy and icky when I got here. I love your soft, smooth, hairless body, especially yours." They kissed again and held each other for a long time. The next semester went great. Chris's grades were back on track, and it seemed like Sam was pushing him to see who could get the best grades. He won, but just barely. At the end of the semester, Sam had to return to Japan at her father's insistence. She managed to delay the trip for 3 more weeks, but eventually, she had to leave. The goodbyes weren't as emotional this time. They both knew they'd see each other again in just a couple of months. That fall, Sam returned 2 weeks before the semester began. Chris thought she had matured over the summer and was more beautiful than ever. They settled into their school routine and had a fantastic year. Chris earned nearly a 4.0 GPA and made the dean's list, with Sam only 1/10 of a point behind him. She was also on the dean's list. Over the past couple of years, Chris's parents had come to understand how important Sam was to him, and they felt he should learn more about her culture. So, they paid for a trip to Japan during the summer between his sophomore and junior years. Sam's father sent her money for a ticket, and with that, they were able to upgrade Chris's to first class, alongside hers. Japan. The flight was long, 18 hours, but being in first class made it more comfortable. They had plenty of time to talk, and it was Sam who asked the big question, "Do you have any secrets from me?" Chris paused, looking at her for a long moment, before answering, "Well, only one." "Only one? Will you tell me?" "Yes, but you'll probably hate me. And I've never told this to anyone. It would take a lot to make me hate you. Please, tell me." "Okay, here it goes. You know how I like to keep my body hairless, and you like it that way too, right?" "Yes." "And I said it was for the swim team." "Yes." "Well, that's only half true. Go on." "I like girls' clothes." "So do I." "No, I mean I like to wear girls' clothes. I'm a crossdresser." "Oh." She sat there for a few seconds, then smiled. "Is that all? I thought you were going to tell me something terrible. You have a softer side, and that's one of the things I love about you. But that's cool. You like to wear girls' clothes. Too bad we're not the same size, we could share." "You're not mad? You don't hate me?" "No. I love you too much. I love you for who you are, and if dressing like a girl is part of you, then I'm fine with it. But, I want to see you dressed. You want to see me dressed? Yes. I want to see if I'd want to go out with you dressed. Go out? I've never been out dressed, only when I was younger, dressing up as a girl for Halloween. There's always a first time. And it could be fun, she said, giving him a smile and a kiss. Chris sat there, stunned. He looked at her again, asking, "You're okay with this? A boyfriend who's a crossdresser? No other questions? It's fine. As long as you don't want to change genders or are gay." "No way. I was just so afraid that you'd hate me when you found out, and that you'd never want to see me again." "No, silly. In my one psychology class, we studied cross-dressing and transgender issues, and I learned a lot about it. Cross-dressers are basically born that way, and they're not going to change. You have to love them or leave them. And, it just so happens that I love you. I love you too. Very much. I know. Now, do you have any secrets from me?" "Nope. You know all about me. Even the old boyfriends." Just then, the airplane captain came on the intercom to announce that the plane was about to land. Sam looked at Chris and said, "Just remember to bow deeply when you meet my parents, and don't call me Sam in front of them. My sister, Miko, will probably give you a kiss. She shouldn't, but that's just how she is. Very forward. You in dresses? Interesting." They made it through Japanese customs without any issues and began looking for Hannah's parents. Chris was a bundle of nerves. He was meeting her parents for the first time, and he wanted to marry this girl one day. They spotted them near the baggage claim, and Hannah waved. Miko waved back, ran over to her sister, gave her a big kiss, then turned to Chris and kissed him like a long-lost brother. The three of them then walked over to where Hannah's parents were waiting, and she introduced Chris. Chris remembered to bow deeply and, in somewhat halting Japanese, said, "I'm very pleased to meet you." Miko was just as pretty as Hannah, and their mother was a beautiful woman around 45. Their father appeared to be a very proper gentleman, also about 45. Hannah's father said something too quickly for Chris to understand, so Hannah turned to him and said, "Dad said to grab our bags. The car is waiting." They grabbed their bags and followed Hannah's parents outside. The two girls were whispering and giggling all the way to the car. Chris caught a few words, like his name and dress. The car was more than Chris had expected. It was a chauffeur-driven limousine, not a large one, but spacious enough for all five of them. The ride to the Matsushita home would take about 2 hours. On the way to the Matsushita home, Mrs. Matsushita turned to Chris and, with perfect English, asked, "So, you're the young man who has stolen my daughter's heart?" Chris immediately broke out in a cold sweat, glancing nervously at Hannah, who grinned at him. "Yes, I guess I am," he said, trying to keep his composure. "I can see why," she replied warmly. "You're a very handsome young man, and quite polite." "Thank you, Chris responded, relieved. From that point, the conversation lightened up. They discussed everything from school and the trip to what they planned to do during Chris's stay in Japan. Chris expressed an interest in seeing the country and was hoping to take a rail trip. He also learned that both Mr. and Mrs. Matsushita had studied in the States. Mr. Matsushita had an MBA from Harvard Business School, and Mrs. Matsushita was a psychologist. The only one not engaging in the conversation was Mr. Matsushita, which made Chris feel a little uneasy. When they arrived at the Matsushita home, Chris was stunned. He had seen pictures of it that Hannah had shown him, but they didn't fully prepare him for what he saw. The house was large and modern, set among beautifully manicured grounds, with a few outbuildings, including a guest house where Chris would be staying. Hannah had mentioned that she had arranged for a place for him to stay free of charge, but she hadn't mentioned where. The car pulled up in front of the guest house. The driver retrieved Chris's bags from the trunk and placed them inside. Chris, Hannah, and Miko got out and stood by the car. Mrs. Matsushita looked at her daughters and said, "We'll see you three at the house for dinner. Show Chris around a little. You can do more tomorrow. And you two behave yourselves." "Yes, Mother," they both replied in unison, bowing. As the car drove away, the three walked inside.
Chris looked at Hannah and said, "Sam, you didn't tell me your dad was rich. You said he was just an officer in a company." The two girls giggled. "He is just a company officer. He's the vice president of a large automobile manufacturing company. I'm not sure he likes me, but I think your mom does. He's just an old stuffed shirt. Play golf with him, and he'll loosen up. And yes, Mom likes you. She better." The three of them settled Chris in and then walked to the house for dinner. Over the next 2 weeks, he and Hannah visited several places, some close to her house and others a couple of hours away by train. He also played a round of golf with Mr. Matsushita, and surprisingly, they had a great time together. It became clear to everyone, including Mr. Matsushita, that there was something special between Chris and Hannah, and they gave the couple as much time alone as they wanted. Miko could be a bit annoying at times, but after all, she was Sam's sister and had known about everything from the start. One evening, toward the end of Chris's second week in Japan, they were sitting in the garden talking, when Hannah asked Chris, "Do you remember what I asked you on the airplane?" "You asked me a lot of things," he replied. "You told me about your cross-dressing, and I said I wanted to see you dressed." "Yes, but I thought you were kidding." "I wasn't kidding. I really want to see what you look like dressed." "Well, I guess when we get back to the States, I don't have any clothes here. If I came up with the clothes here, would you do it?" "I guess. But yours are too small." "I know," she said with a smile. "But I have an idea. You're going to get me in trouble, aren't you?" "No. But we're going shopping tomorrow. And right now, I need to take your measurements." Hand in hand, they walked back to the guest house where Hannah took all the measurements she needed. While she worked, she asked Chris to tell her more about his cross-dressing. He explained that he had started at a very young age with his mother's things. He had found a pair of her panties and nylons in the clothes hamper, taken them to his room, put them on, and been hooked ever since. As he grew older, he began using his sister's clothes and eventually, as a teenager, he bought his own panties, bras, and pantyhose and managed to keep them hidden from his family. It wasn't until he started college, after his roommate dropped out, that he finally purchased some outerwear, a grey skirt, cranberry sweater, and nightgowns from a thrift store. He was worried that someone might say something, but no one did. With his roommate gone, he could dress in privacy. "You should have told me earlier," she said softly. "I was afraid I'd lose you if you found out." "No way, babe. I love you too much." She kissed him goodnight. "Get a good night's sleep, lover. We're shopping tomorrow." Shopping. The phone in the guest house rang early the next morning. It was Sam, telling Chris to come down for breakfast as her dad's driver was going to drop them off at the train station after taking him to work. Chris was down at the house in 15 minutes. He was surprised to see Miko there. She liked to party and sleep in, but it quickly became clear she was going shopping with them, and there was no way she was going to miss out. After dropping Mr. Matsushita at his office, the three of them were dropped off at the train station. It was a somewhat crowded ride. The girls managed to get seats, but Chris had to stand for the hour-long express train ride. Around 9 a.m., the three of them emerged from the station, and the girls immediately knew where they were going. Sam took Chris's hand as they walked 5 blocks down the street to a lingerie shop. Chris hesitated, but Sam led him right through the door. They were greeted by a very friendly saleswoman who showed them where the larger sizes were. The girls browsed through the selection of bra and panty sets, eventually choosing 3. They led Chris to the back of the store where the changing rooms were. Chris protested, "I can't go in there." "Yes, you can. They have men in here all the time." "How do you know?" "I called and asked." "Oh great. The salesgirl knows these are for me." "Yep. Now go in and put them on," Sam said, handing him the 3 sets. Chris took the sets, shaking his head, and went into the changing room. A few minutes later, he called Sam to come look. She opened the door, and both girls looked at the first set. Sam examined it closely for a proper fit, and they both agreed it fit well and looked nice. Miko whispered something to Sam, who smiled and then asked, "What do you use to fill out the cups when you dress?" "Rolled up socks." Rolled up socks. Sam replied, thinking, that won't do. She said something to Miko, who then walked over to the nylon section and returned with a couple of packages. Sam opened them and handed Chris the nylons. Here, try these for fillers. Chris placed a couple of nylons in each cup, and although it helped, it wasn't quite right. Sam thought, we'll work on that later, as well as the bulge in the panties. Okay, Sam said, that set looks good on you. Try one of the others. In the end, Sam decided they would take all 3 sets, despite Chris protesting, I don't need 3 sets of panties and bras. A girl can never have too many, Sam replied with a smile. Chris just shook his head and went back to change into his male clothes. They placed the 3 sets and nylons on the counter, where the salesgirl greeted them with a polite bow and smile. They walked around the store looking at other items. A garter belt set caught Sam's eye, and she picked it up, holding it to Chris with a grin. Chris knew that meant he was adding another piece of girls' underwear to his collection. They went back to the counter, and after exchanging pleasantries, Sam handed the salesgirl a charge card to pay for the purchases. The 3 of them then headed out the door and down the street. Next, they stopped at a high-end women's store. Again, they were greeted by a salesgirl who showed them to the section Sam was interested in, 3 racks of silk blouses in various colors. Sam first picked out a white blouse that should fit Chris, holding it up to him with a smile. Then, she selected a beautiful pink one with embroidery. They headed to the changing rooms, and Chris remarked, I bet you called ahead here too? Sam just smiled. Chris put on the first blouse and walked out of the changing room. Sam took one look at him and shook her head. No. 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 A girl doesn't button all the buttons. Unbutton the top 2. Chris did as she instructed, and she added, much better. That looks fantastic on you. Next, they moved to the skirts. The girls looked through the selection until Miko called Sam over to show her a pleated skirt made of dark red plaid fabric, the kind schoolgirls wear. Chris was led back to the changing room, and after a few minutes, he called out, I can't get it zipped all the way. Sam frowned, had Chris turn around, and tried to zip it. It wouldn't go all the way up. Sam stood back, looked at Chris, nodded, and said something to Miko, who wandered off. Turning to Chris, she said, we need to get you a more feminine shape. How are you going to do that? You'll see. That's what I'm afraid of.